Hello there everybody, Sam Strains here, welcome back to the Railway and welcome to the first review of 2019. So this is a little strange for me because technically speaking I've already filmed my first review of 2019, so I've already done my Happy New Year's and hope you had a happy Christmas and all of that. But since this video is going out first, I'll say it again, Happy New Year, and I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. So yes, I've already filmed the first review, but since then something super special has come out and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make this my first review of the year. So the loco that is something special is the very heavily anticipated Oxford N7. Now I've had this pre-ordered for a very long time and I know a lot of other people have as well, and finally January 2019, here it is. Now this is the third working 00 gauge steam locomotive produced by Oxford Rail. The first of course was the pretty well known Adams radial tank, the second was the, well, now notorious Dean Goods locomotive, and here we are with the N7 tank engine. Really looking forward to seeing what this is like. Now haven't had it out of the box yet, this will be my first ever time getting it out, so the first thing I can say about this really, having not seen the model yet, is the price. Now these are incredibly inexpensive. I think I paid less than £90 for this thing, and that's cheaper, for example, than the Hornby Peckett, which is a fraction of the size of this. So yeah, Oxford Rail are doing something quite nice here. That price point is right in between the Hornby Railroad range, for example, and then the top of the range stuff but made by Backman Branch Line and Hornby Railways and that sort of thing. It's sort of a price point that isn't really utilised very much in this hobby, and so it's great to see Oxford Rail producing something that basically is a little bit more affordable for everybody to enjoy. And fingers crossed this is really going to be great. We'll see what this is like. So, no more waffling, let's get this out. The brand new Oxford N7 in this beautiful wartime grey, which we'll talk about in a little more detail when we get it out. But yeah, let's get this out and let's see what it's like. I really hope this one's good. Okay, so there it is in the box. Can't wait to get this thing out. I should also say, by the way, that I bought this from Hatton's and that they are now in stock. So if you like what you see here in this review, there is going to be a link in the description of this video. So if you fancy picking yourself one up, you might want to do it reasonably quickly because, as I say, at such a low price, these things might not be in stock for all that long. So yeah, anyway, there we have the loco in the box. You can just about see it there. It's almost as though it should be facing the other way though, isn't it? You sort of just get the back end through there. So yeah, I don't know whether they came from the factory like that, or I know some retailers do like to take the locos out and test them before they send it to you, which is a nice service, so possibly that's the case with this, I'm not too sure. Anyway, if I show you on the end of the box here, we have the sticker here which has the code OR76N7001, and it is an N7 loco, or as it was from the GER K85 060 number 1002, and that's basically all the box reveals really about this model. There's no information or history on the class on the back of the box, which is good for us because it means we can get straight to it and open this up. So here we go then, for the first ever time, the Oxford N7. Alright, and like I say, I've not had this out of the packaging yet, so this for me will be quite a surprise. So yeah, there it is. Lovely looking thing, isn't it? Straight away in this wartime grey. This is obviously before they became part of the LNER, which is why it's in the grey, although I think there are some other liveries available, or there probably will be more to come. Okay, so there we have the blister pack. There is some paperwork in here I've noticed, so very quickly I'll give you a quick look at that. So yeah, this is the operation and maintenance little booklet, it seems, for the N7 locomotive 062. There's a little bit of history there, so if you want to try and pause that and read it, you feel free to, but I will be giving you some later on. And yet we've got a little basic diagram here, shows you how to fit the brake ring couplings. Let's see, running in, yes, removing the body, presumably to fit the DCC decoder. Okay, yep, that is all fine. I can see what looks like quite a nice big beefy motor in this one, which has to be a good sign, doesn't it? Hopefully we'll get some decent performance out of this. That is the hope, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Right, so I think we're here. I think the moment has arrived where we can start taking this thing out. So let's take the cover off here and have a quick look at the detail pack, which seems to be relatively sparse. It looks like we've just got a couple of vacuum pipes here, so not an awful lot to fit yourself, which is good. For a cheaper model, you might have expected to have quite a lot to fit yourself, but no, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be fully assembled, which is very nice. And I've had, you know, close to 200 quid Backman locos that have had a whole wealth of detail that you've got to fit, having already spent that kind of money on it. So yeah, that is a good sign. Okay, I'm ready. Here we go, let's take this out. Wow, it looks quite impressive. It looks quite impressive. My goodness. What? This thing weighs an absolute ton. This was dirt cheap and it weighs a ton. You know what as well? There's a lot of die cast on this thing. That is astonishing. You can just tell because it was freezing cold when I first picked it up. The boiler doesn't seem to be, as far as I can tell, but the tanks definitely are. There's no doubt about it. The coal bunker definitely is, I would say, as well. I'm just touching it against my lips, which is a really odd thing to do, I know. Wow, I was not expecting that. You know, this is a model that was so inexpensive. Like I say, less than 90 quid. This thing was cheaper, quite a lot, than the Peckett. And yet it weighs an absolute ton. I will weigh this for you later on. Sorry, I'm just a little bit gobsmacked by that. I was expecting it to be all plastic. I've had quite a few Oxford products that have been super lightweight. Wow, I'm lost for words. This thing feels, it feels so solid. It really does. Wow, that has blown me away. That has blown me away. And also, just looking at it, it seems like it's going to be a super detailed model as well. It looks very, very impressive. Of course, we'll get on to more of the details in just a second. Right, I think I'm going to have to go and sort of gather myself after seeing that. That is super, super impressive. So I'll leave you then with a little bit of history on the N7, and then after that we will take a good close look at this thing. Wow, very, very impressed. Great first impressions. So this class started life on the GER, which of course stands for the Great Eastern Railway, where they were first built to the design of Alfred John Hill in 1915. At this time they were known as the K85 class, as we saw on the box, and they were used for passenger work in the suburbs of London. Now, when grouping occurred in 1923 and they became part of the LNER, Nigel Gresley continued to produce the design up until 1928, by which time a hefty 134 had been built in total, so there were quite a few of these things running around in the end. The entirety of the class survived the 1948 nationalisation, but in 1957 the first member of the class was withdrawn, and by 1962 the remainder had been withdrawn from service and then scrapped, with only one exception, number 7999, which was in fact preserved. Alright, so I'm still a little bit bowled over by this thing at the moment, which is a little bit unprofessional, I know, but I'm going to go for it and see what I can say about this thing. So my choice phrase to start with was going to be that this is competitively priced, but I think having looked at it now, I think it goes a lot further than that. To the point really where I think other manufacturers are going to find themselves in a bit of trouble if this carries on, because obviously the story has perpetuated in recent years that it somehow costs hundreds and hundreds of pounds to get yourself a decent model of this calibre. I mean, take Bachmann for example with their new C-Class announcement. That thing, even though it's got a very complex livery, is going to be sold for £200, and it's a model now that's a few years old and there's not nearly as much die cast on it as this, and yet it's being sold for double the price. So yeah, I think really we need to take a hats off to Oxford Rail for this. I said very much the same thing when it came to the Dean goods, but they could easily have charged an awful lot more for this thing, as I say, given the amount of detail and given the amount of die cast and the weight of this thing, and yet there they are selling them for £87 so that everybody can get their hands on them, and I really do think that is something to be applauded. I think Oxford Rail are actually doing a great deal for our hobby by producing competitively priced locomotives. So I say this when a model is bad, I always say vote with your wallets. Do the same with this. This looks like it's going to be a great model, so vote with your wallets, even if this locomotive might not be your cup of tea. If you agree with the concept and you agree with you know, Oxford Rail's ethos, for example, I think it's definitely worth supporting them with this, because we all like a bargain, and it would be awesome if Oxford Rail could continue along this way. Right, so let's start talking about the model then. Now, as promised, I have weighed this thing and it weighs in at a whopping 300 grams. In fact, it's just a shade under 300 grams, about 290. Now, once again, to give you a little bit of context on that, that is double the weight of the Hornby H-Class. You know the one, I'll show a picture on the screen if I've got one. It's a similar size locomotive, which is why I've chosen it. That is double the weight, so that is just ridiculous. That really, really is crazy how much this thing weighs. So no doubt when we get it tested, it's going to be a great puller. And as I say, there's a lot of die cast, so the entirety of the running board seems to be die cast. The tanks here are die cast, and also the coal bunker at the back there is die cast. I assume the boiler hasn't been done in die cast just because it's quite a complex piece, and it seems to me that with the die cast stuff it's difficult to get the fidelity in there, and also I think the model is heavy enough with just those few die cast components, so that is pretty good. The livery is also very nicely done. It looks like a complex livery on the outside because it is quite unusual, but if you look quite closely, it's relatively simple, which is a good, is a good idea for a relatively cheap model. It means that the livery can be produced quite inexpensively, so it's smart thinking there. Having said that though, the lining is very crisply done. You have got a little bit of gold around the smoke box there, which is quite nice to see. And let's just say a word about the grey as well. I do love these wartime grey locomotives. It isn't the same grey that we saw on the Hatton's P-Class though. It's a very different sort of grey from the GER. Quite a light grey, almost an off-white you might say. But yeah, very, very unusual, and certainly it won't be everybody's cup of tea, but I find it quite attractive personally. So we've got the lettering, or the numbering I should say, on the side of the tanks with the running number 1002. Quite unusually, you've got the running number duplicated again on the side of the coal bunker there, which is quite nice to see, but all of the printing is done to a high standard. And also on the buffer beams, you've got quite a lot of printed detail. You've got the running number on the back one there. And while we're looking at that buffer beam, just look at the level of separately fitted detail there. You've got the lamp irons pre-fitted, and you've also got all of the vacuum gear as well. And don't forget, we got some in the detail pack as well. The buffers appear to be made of metal, which is very, very nice, and given the price of this model, it's incredibly impressive that the buffers are even sprung on there. So again, that is good evidence that these things really can be done on a budget, and I think once again it's great that Oxford have put these details onto here. You've got a few other impressive details as well. I mean, look, the smokebox dart, maybe you would expect that to be just part of the moulding given the price of this thing, but no, it's separately painted and separately fitted, so that is really, really impressive. Now clearly Oxford will have had to economise somewhere on this model, and it's easy to see where those are. The whistles here in front of the cab are apparently made of plastic. They do look a little bit plasticky there, but I think we can forgive them that. They are nonetheless quite well moulded though. They are quite realistic looking. And also the top of the chimney here seems to be once again just painted plastic, which is a little bit noticeable, but I don't think it detracts overall from the model. Another small area where the model has been economised is if we look underneath the boiler there, you can see there is no interpretation of the valve gear. Once again, I would have been blown away if there was, especially given the price. However, if you look just a little way back, you can see that there is at least some attempt to include some detail under there, which I suppose gets a thumbs up, definitely. There is, however, an awful lot of separately fitted pipework and such. On this side, you can see there's the pipe there, which comes from the tanks to the smoke box there. But if we look on the other side, you've got what I think is the condensing equipment and perhaps a Westinghouse pump. Again, you know I don't really know an awful lot about the prototypes of these things, but there those are nonetheless. And another thing I really have to talk about is the cab. Now, again, there's a small economisation going on with the cab there because there's no sort of wood panelling effect on the bottom. Once again, I'm not 100% sure that the real thing had it. I assume it probably would have done, but on this model it is painted just brown. But I suppose it's a good thing that it's painted. The roof of the cab is also painted too, so it's not just black plastic, which again is great to see. But I'm putting off showing you the inevitable here because the actual cab detail is astonishing. This is quite an enclosed cab, so it maybe needn't have been. But just look at that. Hopefully I can get a shot that does this justice. All of the gauges have got the numbers painted onto them. In fact, they're some of the best gauges I've ever seen. It really is an astonishingly detailed cab. Again, I wasn't sure whether it was even going to have a painted cab, but I certainly wasn't disappointed. Absolutely amazing is that. And you've also got glazed windows with this cab, and not only are they glazed, but you've also got this highly intricate sort of grille effect going on here, which appear to be separately fitted pieces, which are absolutely tiny. Goodness knows how those things were moulded and then fitted without being broken, but they are there, you know, there's the living proof. Really quite astonishing. And that leads me on to the other thing, really, quality. This thing came out of the box in 100% perfect condition. I haven't found any parts broken off. There was certainly nothing floating around in the box, and also the livery has been applied perfectly. I can't see a mark on it. Another thing I quite like about this model that I think is worth mentioning is the colour of the rods there. I really quite like the red. Quite unusual. It does look pretty unusual, doesn't it? It must have been a part of the GER wartime grey. But yeah, I just thought that was worth mentioning. And again, that's another quite nice feature of the model, which makes it stand out perhaps from other locomotives. So there we go then, the Oxford N7. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about. I suppose the coal. I ought to show you the coal in the bunker. Once it's relatively realistic looking coal, I'll have to have a better look at the instruction manual to find out whether they're separately fitted or not. I think that beats trying to prize it out and then damaging it and realising that it isn't removable. But who knows, it probably is. And also I should say that there's this sort of guard around the coal bunker, which is really quite a nice finely detailed piece once again. It is plastic, I believe that is, sitting on top of the die-cast coal bunker there, but it is quite fine scale and very effective and very convincing, I would say. Okay, so there we go. That is a quick look at the locomotive. There are more details to talk about, so I guess if you want to see those, you need to get one yourself. But everything has been so superb about this model. I want to get it down onto the track now and find out whether it's a full house and see whether the performance matches the rest of the model in terms of calibre. So let's do that now and we'll see how this thing runs. Okay, so there it is then, the wonderful N7 down onto the track, and it must be said, you know, on paper it's a good model, but just as a personal thing, I love the way this thing looks. The wartime grey is beautifully unusual. I love pre-grouping stuff, so this loco really is ticking all of the boxes for me at the moment. So, on to performance then. In the past, performance, let's be honest, has been a little bit of an issue with the Oxford Rail locos, and I haven't tested this out yet, so I still don't know whether this one's going to be any better. However, having had a look at the mechanism, having not used it yet, it does seem to be pretty good. Now, I haven't had the body off or anything, so I can't say anything about the motor. However, the first thing I noticed is that the rear trailing axle there is sprung, and if I just lift the front of the loco up there, you can see that yes, it does spring into the chassis there, which is fantastic because with the with the Adams radial tank, some of the axles that were non-driven didn't have enough spring on them, and then when you start an incline or finish an incline, the weight is taken off the driving wheels and the loco would wheel slip even if it didn't have a load. So hopefully that won't be an issue with this one. Also, having looked at the underside of the model, I can see that there is a proper set of bearings that the wheel set sits into. Again, I've had Bachmann locos that cost twice as much as this, where the wheel set was just slapped into the chassis, into square slots into the chassis, which is just terrible. But no, this has got a proper set of bearings, which is all good, and all three of the driving axles do have pickups going to them, which is always a good sign. Right, I think we're ready then. Are you ready? Let's give this thing a little bit of juice and see how it goes. Here we go. I'm just clicking it on now, and I'm turning it up slowly. There we go. It's moving. It's not dreadfully smooth at slow speeds, but who knows, it should improve as it's had once it gets a run in, I should say. It hasn't had its run in yet. But that's not bad actually, is it? Yeah, actually, no, that isn't bad. There we go. If I get it in that, you know, just get the level just right on the controller, it does creep forward quite nicely, actually. Hey, it didn't look like it was going to start with, but actually, that is very good. That is generally a very good crawl, and again, this is a model that cost £87. That's just, it's ridiculous. I thought to myself, it's got to fall down somewhere, hasn't it? It can't be good in all areas, but it seems to be. And it's quiet, I can't hear anything, I don't know if you can. Yeah, that's not actually bad at all. It's relatively quiet. It's gotten over my express point. I know you can't see it right now, but it's crawled over the express point, so obviously pickups are not a problem. And it's relatively quiet. I'm genuinely amazed by this. That's it. It's ticked all the boxes. It's going to be a good puller. I mean, we'll test it later just to confirm, but weighing what it does, coming up for 300 grams, there's no way it won't be a good puller. Wow, I'm absolutely amazed. I think we might have our loco of the year already, and it's the first review, so that's bad. But yeah, can't complain. Right, medium speed then. Let's get this thing running and see what it's like once it's had a chance to run in. I think pleasantly surprised is an understatement. That's at half speed there, and that's a really nice, you know, sort of scale speed. Not too fast. Sometimes these locos race when you put them at half speed, but that is generally a very good speed. Man, just look at it. I mean, this is genuinely a top-class model. I would have given this a good mark for value, you know, if this had have cost 130 quid like the Hornby Large Prairies are going to, but here it is, so inexpensive. You think to yourself, how can it be a decent model for that? You know, that is the same price that Hornby were selling their N2s for. Not so long ago, I remember seeing those at, you know, 80 odd quid or something like that, and that's a 30-year-old model. Here we've got a brand new tooled model, never been released before, and it's being sold for less than £90. I mean, the mind boggles, and it's spot on in every single area. I must say that I am by no means an expert on the prototype, so as far as accuracy and realism goes, I'm, you know, best not to comment. There are people that know a lot more and therefore can say a lot more clearly than I can whether this thing is accurate or not. But certainly from a value, from a quality and from a performance point of view, I can give this a 100% thumbs up. It's absolutely wonderful. And on top of all of that, I actually love it. It's just so strange looking. I just absolutely love it. It's exactly my cup of tea. So yeah, I'm genuinely excited by this. This for me is one of the best purchases I've made in a long time. Very pleased with this. Watch it skip over these express points, look. Not even a single blip as it goes over there. It's as though there's nothing there at all. Right, I'm going to get this running for a little bit longer then, and I will be right back with some pulling power tests for it. So don't go anywhere, I will be back very shortly. Okay folks, I am back and she's had a good run in now, so I'm going to do another little slow speed test and see if she runs any smoother, although it's difficult to improve on what it's already done. I must say as well that I've noticed quite visibly, or audibly I should say I guess, that the sound has decreased a lot as well over the last half an hour to an hour or so. So that has to be a good thing as well. It's a lot quieter now than it was when it began. Okay, let's try that crawl again. I mean, it won't have gotten any worse, will it? See if I can get it in that sweet spot again. Yes, there we are. And notice how smooth it is. There's no sort of sudden speed up and then slow down and then speed up again and slow down. It's just perfectly smooth at a constant speed, and that is so slow. How slow that is ridiculous. Let's go back, shall we? There we go. And it's just as good in reverse as it is forwards as well, which is not always the case. So yeah, round of applause, man. That is just astonishingly good. Right, so as promised, I want to do a bit of a pulling power test. Now, this is a brand new loco. It's not advisable to be stressing them out with massive loads when they're brand new. However, I want to see what this thing is capable of, so I've done something a little bit wappy. So, just a little bit further down the line, I have 8 LNER teak coaches. Now, these are big coaches. They're quite old-fashioned, they've got quite a bit of drag on them, and there's 8 of them, so that is a massive train, and this is a tiny loco. I mean, it's not tiny, but it's pretty small. I've got bigger locos that would definitely struggle with this. But I'm going to try it. I mean, it's heavy enough. I think deep down it's capable of doing it, but I want to see it do it, you know? So let's try it. Let's get coupled and let's see if it will do it. Let's see. Right. Ooh, I'm a bit nervous about this. Okay, let's try a nice steady coupling. Let's see if that worked. Yep, it certainly did, and the couplings don't droop down at all. They're nice and firm in that position. In fact, it's difficult to make them drop down at all. So they couple perfectly. There's no sort of Helgen style lifting up the coupling before it'll work. It just works first time. I mean, how can it be this good? Right, everything about it is just spot on. Look at that, it's moving as though it hasn't got a load at all. How can it be so good for £87? Has somebody sent me the wrong thing? I don't know. Right. Look at that, 8 coaches. Just brilliant. Right, let's go to Gordon's Hill then and see if she can haul it up there. Okay, she is approaching. And my goodness, she is hauling those as though she hasn't got a load at all. I can't see any wheel slip, and that is 8 coaches. This thing is an absolute beast. There is no reason for it to, there's no good reason for it to be able to pull this much. And yet it weighs so much and it's got such a decent mechanism in there that it's able to do this easily. Now that is impressive. I've got Pacifics that can't do that. Now, that was something else. What a small locomotive to be hauling such a huge train. Absolutely crazy. Right, I'm going to pop off a couple of those coaches then, so I'm not burning her out on her first ever video. That would not be good. But okay, let's see then, so 6 coaches now. That's a little bit easier on the motor, I would imagine. Let's get her started, and let's have a proper running session with her. So today's theme then elsewhere on the layout is 062 locomotives. So in that spirit I have got the Bachmann Webb coal tank coming in here, which is a lovely model, much more expensive than the Oxford N7, and I think objectively not quite as good a model either, but still very nice to see nonetheless, and she's got some of those little 4-wheeled coaches, which is quite nice. And then on the inside line, yet another 062. This is, of course, the N2, which is the same sort of region as the N7, so quite similar looking. That's quite an old one. This is a Hornby one, ex-mainline, ex-Airfix, whatnot. And it's quite a nice model. Again, these have been sold even more expensively than the N7. But, you know, nowhere near as good, but still quite nice to look at. And it's got some clerestory coaches. So see which other locos you can spot on the layout, and there is an odd one out. So let me know if you see it. So I genuinely do think this thing is wonderful, and once again, hats off to Oxford Rail. They just seem to be in touch with their customers, don't they? Not in touch literally, as in they're calling you up or whatnot, but they're in touch in the sense that they just seem to understand what people like, what people want, and they understand that not every man has got 200 quid to spend on a brand new model. So I think it's really, really admirable that Oxford Rail are producing models as good as this, but models that can also be bought quite inexpensively too. So that's why I think it's really, really important that we support Oxford Rail with this. Like I say, even if you've got a modern image diesel layout and this is not the sort of thing you would run, if you can afford to, I would still suggest picking one of these up, not only because it's just a superb piece of kit and I think you will enjoy it, but because it's important that we support Oxford Rail so that they can do well and then obviously get to making those models that you want. So I think it's a case of if you agree with their ethos, then definitely support them, because they will be able to go from strength to strength and then produce the models that you want them to, even though that this N7 might not necessarily be your thing. I think it's just the principle. Very, very rarely do we get a model this good that is this inexpensive, and that is something that I really, really am passionate about, and it's something that just gets me excited. And I make no apologies for that. I know some people think it's unprofessional to see me getting excited over a model, but what else are they good for other than giving us a good time and causing us to enjoy ourselves? I think that's exactly the purpose of a good model. Okay, so let's have some of my ratings then for the astonishingly impressive Oxford N7. So, welcome to the new rating system, which is now done with stars, and I'll introduce this properly on the next review, which was the first one I recorded. Now, one of my pet hates is giving half marks when it's a scale of 1 to 5. It's always annoyed me when people do that because, you know, why not just make it out of 10? However, in this case, the detail has to be 4.5 for me, right? Because the only criticism I could come up with was the fact that there was no interpretation of the valve gear between the frames, and possibly for the fact that the whistles and things were made of plastic and not die cast. But to be honest, that just seemed a little bit unfair to knock off an entire point just for those 2 minor niggles. So you won't see me do it often, but I have given this 4.5 stars on the detail front. Now, the performance, I absolutely can't fault it. You saw the smooth slow crawl that this did straight out of the box. Now that it's warmed up, it's quieter, it's even smoother, and you've just seen how much it can pull. 8 coaches on an incline is just absolutely ridiculous. It absolutely is ridiculous. So that's a 5 out of 5. The mechanism itself seems to be absolutely excellent. I haven't had the body off yet, so I can't say what type of motor's in there, whether it's 3 or 5 pole. I do know that it runs very well, and on top of that you've got the sprung rear trailing axle, and you've also got all pickups on every driving wheel, as well as proper bearings in the wheel set, so that has to be a 5 out of 5. Also, the quality has to be a 5 out of 5 as well. Not only had nothing dropped off on this thing during transit, but there's so much die cast on there, it's been assembled to such a high standard, and the paint job is just perfect as well, so I'm struggling to knock points off anywhere here, really. And finally, value, 5 out of 5. For £87, this thing is just insane. And this is a perfect example. This perfectly backs up what I've been saying about how the price sets a tone for the model. Because when you pay £200 for a locomotive, that sets such a high expectation for a model. And if it comes and there's, you know, it's not 100% perfect, then you're disappointed automatically. With this one, it's completely the opposite. You've got such a low, unassuming price of £87. You pick that up and you think, well, you know, it's cheap, it's probably not going to be much good, but we'll pick it up for that price anyway. And then it comes, and not only is it better than expected, but it blows the other manufacturers out of the water, and in doing so blows the mind as well. It's just incredible. I can't say enough about how this completely blew away my expectations. For £87, this has got to be the best value I've ever seen, and that's even if the thing's completely inaccurate, which it might be for all I know. But even if it is, for beginners or those that just enjoy good models to run, I can't fault it. I cannot fault it. So 5 out of 5 there. Overall then, that is 9.73 out of 10, which is bad because that's a score that's going to be impossible to beat, and we've got that straight away on the first review. But I can't complain. Nothing can touch my mood at the moment. This is what gives me my buzz, by the way, when you pick up a model that didn't cost the earth and it turns out to be one of the best in your collection. How can that be? It blows the mind. Okay, so into the ranking then. It's a new year, so a new ranking starts. It's top of the list. Nothing else on the list, of course. But even so, that's going to be very, very hard to beat. This has got a long time at the top of the list. I'm pretty confident in that. Wow, very, very good. So, what a way to start 2019. Let's hope that that sets the tone for the year, because if that's true, we're in for a very, very good year this year. What a wonderful little model. And of course, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Have you got any criticisms? What do you like about it? I'd love to know. And also, if you know a bit more about the prototype than I do, let me know what you think with regards to accuracy as well. Alright folks, well I really do hope you enjoyed that as thoroughly as I did. This has been such a pleasure to review, really lovely, and it's the best £87 I think I've spent in a long time as well. So thank you all for your company, I hope you enjoyed it as always. If you did, let me know why, or if you didn't I guess, let me know why in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. But for now, that's it for the first review of the year. Let's hope we get a lot more like it. It's going to be difficult to beat this though. And yeah, I think that's all I've got to say for now. So I will see you all very soon folks. Take care of yourselves and once again, thanks for watching.